I'll first discuss about Article 35A, 370, and then what are the changes we did on August 5th. Okay, so this way we go. So regarding this question is about Article 35A, and Article 35A basically deals with permanent residents of Jammu and Kashmir state and their special rights and privileges. So that is why first statement here is completely wrong. It doesn't talk anything about extending any parts of Indian Constitution. So if you remove the first statement, then it will be 2 and 3. So that is why answer is B, 2 and 3. So the B is correct because that article has brought in or added to the constitution by presidential order. Usually in constitution, if we want to add anything, that falls under constitutional amendment. So that constitutional amendment, you all know, right? It is under Article 368. But this Article 35A was added by a presidential order under the Article 370 power, because Article 370 gives the power to the president to give an order. So that is how it was added, and that is why it was a controversy. That Article 35 was a controversy. So that is about second statement. And third statement, it is very clear. Like it gives that power to Jammu and Kashmir state legislature to define who are the permanent residents of state. So that is about that question. So yeah, coming back to first we'll see 35A. So 35A, as I said, there are three or four statements. Like the first thing is it came into picture because of Delhi Agreement of 1952. In 1952, there was an agreement between Jawaharlal Nehru and Sheikh Abdullah of Jammu and Kashmir. So based on that, to give special kind of privileges to Jammu and Kashmir people, this article was made through the presidential order. So that order, what it does is it enables state Jammu and Kashmir to define who are permanent residents, and what are the special rights that are to employ that right to state public sector jobs, settlements in state, acquisition of property, scholarship, and welfare benefits. So these kind of benefits are only for Jammu and Kashmir permanent residents before Article 370. It was brought in by presidential order, not by Article 368. Second thing, it is discriminatory against other Indians. So like whoever are there, like from Himachal Pradesh or from Uttarakhand, whoever goes to Jammu and Kashmir and works there or want to settle there, they can't do it because of Article 35A. And finally, you all know we have certain fundamental rights like Article 14, right to equality, and right against discrimination, freedoms through speech. So all these articles will be violated because of Article 35A. So these are the grounds on which Article 35A was being opposed or was bit controversial before Article 370. Now there is no Article 35 only because Article 370 has removed everything. So that is Article 35A. So this is Article 35 verbatim of Constitution. Coming back to Article 370, how Article 370 is different from Article 35A? While Article 35A talks only about permanent residents, Article 370 is the major provision that connects Jammu and Kashmir and Indian Constitution. So according to Article 370, there are three provisions. First provision is that Jammu and Kashmir can have its own constitution. Okay. Second thing, Indian Constitution will extend to Jammu and Kashmir only with the concurrence of Jammu and Kashmir's Constituent Assembly. Okay. So anything if we want to extend to Jammu and Kashmir, only the concurrence, that means the permission or the approval of Jammu and Kashmir Constituent Assembly is needed. Except three parameters. I already told that three features, right? Defense, external affairs, and communications. And the last thing, the third clause is you can remove the Article 370 also, but for that also you need permission of Jammu and Kashmir Constituent Assembly. So this is Article 370. Now the present status. So this is a verbatim. Okay. So now the present status, what we have done on August 5th. So on August 5th, what they did is basically they used Article 370 clause 3. That is the third provision. President can remove the Article 370 with the permission of Constituent Assembly of Jammu and Kashmir. He used that and diluted the Article 370 itself. But how? Constituent Assembly. So what they did is they had an explanation in that article. If there is no Constituent Assembly of Jammu and Kashmir, then normal assembly of Jammu and Kashmir can be consulted. But normal assembly was also not there because at that time Jammu and Kashmir was under president's rule. So who is the power exerciser there? It is governor. So they said, okay, as assembly is not there, we'll take the permission of governor. Now if you see who is governor, Governor is nothing but representative of center only. So it is like center asking itself permission to remove the Article 370. That is why it became controversy. So what it did, it diluted Article 370. First thing. Second thing, BJP government also did the second thing is they passed a bill, that is Jammu and Kashmir Reorganization Bill. So according to that bill, they have clear state and made two union territories. One is Ladakh Union Territory and the other is Jammu and Kashmir Union Territory. So that is the map here. And here, another important feature of this division is Jammu and Kashmir will have the legislature, okay, state legislature, even though it is union territory. So we were discussing like after the dilution of Article 370, I said there was another bill called Jammu and Kashmir Reorganization Bill. So according to that bill, Jammu and Kashmir state was divided into two union territories. But the main feature of this bill is while Jammu and Kashmir will have a legislature, Union Territory of Ladakh will not have a legislature. So it is like something, Jammu and Kashmir will be something like Delhi, like how Delhi has a legislature, that is assembly. Jammu and Kashmir will also have assembly, and Ladakh Union Territory doesn't have a legislature, and it's something like Pondicherry. So that is another important feature. And rest of the details are very clear here, like what are the other resolutions passed and how it, all the sharing, how it came and all. And this reorganization bill also has another feature where it amends Representation of People's Act. That means even the delimitation, the elections, the number of seats that needs to be there, all will be altered after this reorganization. So that is about this new bill. Next question. Yes. So see this question and quickly mark your option. I'll read the question once for you. Consider the following statements with respect to Jammu and Kashmir Reorganization Bill 2019. So just now we have discussed. It provides for two union territories with legislatures, Jammu and Kashmir Union Territory and Ladakh Union Territory. It provides for amendment of Representation of People's Act 1950. And the third thing, Leh, Kargil districts were made part of Union Territory of Ladakh. Okay. So which of the statements are correct? So if you are done marking, then we'll go with revealing the answer. So here, as I said, the first option is wrong here because it said two union territories with legislature. So, but union territory with legislature is only for Jammu and Kashmir. For Ladakh UT, there is no legislature. So that is why if it would have been a union territory with legislature for Jammu and Kashmir and only Ladakh union territory, it would have been correct. So remove the first one and the option is C, 2 and 3. Okay, so it is correct. Leh and Kargil both were now part of Ladakh. Okay, and the Representation of People's Act, as I said, it is going to be amended. So, and now as we discuss this, I also want you to do some research or some further study. So go and see what is Article 368, because Article 368 talks about constitutional amendment, and there are three types of amendments in that also. One is simple majority, one is special majority, and the other one is we need the concurrence of state legislative assemblies also. Like half of the state legislative assemblies needs to approve. So these are the three kind of amendments under Article 368. So go and read it, because the UPSC sometimes might trace the current issue or take the inspiration from this Article 370 and ask you about amendments. So go and refer to Article 368, what are the types and what are the powers needed. Next thing, Article 370, like what is the current status and whatever we have discussed right now. And next thing, as I said, these are the three bills that were passed on August 5th. So try to see a brief overview about them. This we have anyway discussed, but just to have better understanding. So now coming back to this seventh question. So this is another significant event that happened in August in first week. So this is about Deep Ocean Mission. Okay, there are three important missions in India right now going on. Okay, one is Gaganyaan. You all know that is about sending the astronauts, 3 astronauts to space by 2022. Second thing, underwater Deep Ocean Mission. Okay, second one is this, and the third one, it is Chandrayaan 2. So these three are very important from this year perspective. So try to know every detail about it. Now let's go to the question. Consider the following statements with respect to Deep Ocean Mission of India. First one, it is a mission being executed by ISRO to map the ocean floor of the Indian Ocean. And UNEP has awarded 1.5 square kilometers area in Indian Ocean region to India to explore and extract mineral resources. Third statement, the mission also involves studying marine species lying at the bed of ocean floor. Fourth one, the main aim of the mission is to extract polymetallic noodles. Now, if you are done with the marking, let's go with each option. So first one, if you use some basic common sense, you will understand there the organization is ISRO. So can you think ISRO now doing underwater also? So like there will be separate organizations or separate ministry that deals with it, because ISRO is mainly for space. So rule out the first option. I guess you will get the answer if you rule out the first one. This is the way how UPSC also gives you option. Like whenever there is a very tricky question, there will be one nonsense option. Okay, like if you use some common sense, you can eliminate that, and if you eliminate that, you will get the right answer. So here if you eliminate one, then the answer should be incorrect, right? Okay, which of the following statements are correct? Incorrect. That means one is incorrect. Okay, now let's go by statement wise. Second thing, UNEP. I think you all know what is UNEP. UNEP stands for United Nations Environment Program. Okay, so it is something related to environment. So do you think they will award something on the ocean base, or like they will give permission to extract mineral resources? Because if you extract something, that will cause loss. So rule out second. Third thing, it involves studying marine species. This is something tricky, leave that as it is. Now fourth one, the main aim of the mission is to extract polymetallic noodles. So this seems very reasonable. So fourth one is correct. So if we eliminate the fourth one, or fourth one is the only correct option, that means 1, 2 and 3 are the answer, are incorrect statements. So D is the right answer. So now we'll discuss this mission in detail. So basically, Ministry of Earth Sciences has launched this mission in August 2019, and it is of 8,000 crore mission. The main intention of the main objective of this mission is to explore and extract polymetallic noodles. Okay, and what are these polymetallic noodles? This is also important. Like whatever the mineral names that are mentioned here, you have to remember them, because sometimes UPSC might ask what are the minerals that are present in polymetallic noodles. So polymetallic noodles are small potato like rounded accretions made up of manganese, nickel, cobalt, copper and iron hydroxide. And these noodles are very important because they are formed from years of deposition in ocean floor. And once they are formed, these minerals like nickel, cobalt, you all know these are used in batteries. And now batteries are very important, all because we are switching for electric vehicles and for cleaner energy sources. So that is why to get these rare earth metals, polymetallic noodles are very important. And to extract it from ocean, it is also very much economical and beneficial. So that is why this concept or this minerals are very important. And next thing, they lie at Indian Ocean floor, like on the base of the floor they will be, and that too at the depth of around 6,000 meters. That means about 6 kilometers, and they can vary from size of millimeters to centimeter. That means they will be very small. Okay, as I said, it will be used in smartphones, batteries, and all. And now, which organizations gives this permission to extract those noodles? It is International Seabed Authority. Remember this, ISA, International Seabed Authority, an autonomous international organization under UNCLOS, that is United Nations Convention on Law of Sea, allots the area for deep sea mining. So this is under deep sea mining. So what happens is basically every country will have certain exclusive economic zone. So you will have complete right to extract anything or do anything in that area. But beyond that, if you want to extract or do some research, there are certain international laws you have to abide by and get permission from. So this area, these polymetallic noodles are somewhere in the central Indian Ocean. That means very far from Indian shores. That is why this UNCLOS body, under UNCLOS convention, they have a body called ISA, and they will every year or for periodically they'll award certain area to certain countries to extract the noodles and use them. So that is how India also got about 1.5 lakh square kilometers in central Indian Ocean for noodle exploration. And now, do you think India is the only country that was granted with these rights? Yes, in Indian Ocean, it was India, but there were other countries also in Pacific Ocean and all, like Russia, China, US also got similar kind of approval to extract in their nearby oceans. And now, finally, yeah, as this is the last point. Like apart from Central Indian Ocean Basin, polymetallic nodules have been identified from the Central Pacific Ocean also. Like in Pacific Ocean also it is there. And remember this word, it is Clarion Clipperton Zone. So it is called as Clarion Clipperton Zone in Pacific Ocean. So this is about deep sea ocean mission. So this is kind of diagram, and if you see here there are some geographical features on the bottom of the slide. Okay, you can see here it is a abyssal plain. So this you would have already studied in geography. Like when there is a depth bottom, it is called abyssal plain, and then when it rises and when there is a mountain under sea, then it is called sea mount. Okay, with a partial exposure, then it is called seamount. So try to go back and see what are the different features, geographical features under sea, like what is seamount, what is gout, what is like continental basin, what is the continental slope. All these aspects also see, because sometimes they might go to the concept based questions as well. So if you can see here, it will be like from ship there will be two pipes, and then one it is to clean and one it is to extract. These black dots are nothing but polymetallic noodles. So here we have, again, why this question came, because we took this inspiration from article 370 again, because article 370 is such an important decision in August. It made around 20 days of editorials completely focused on article 370 and different effects of it. And one of the important effect is federalism, and federalism of India suddenly came into question. Why? Because if center can all of a sudden remove special status for Jammu and Kashmir, there is also special status, if you all know, for other states like Himachal Pradesh, for northeast states, from article 371A to H. Okay, like in these Himalayan states, no other person can, like, there is fifth schedule and sixth schedule areas also, like there are special tribal rights for them. So this is also kind of special status, right? So that is why if center can remove article 370, many people in northeast fear that they might someday remove even article 371 also. So that is why this question came into existence, that federalism. So now let's go with the question. Which of the following statements regarding Indian federalism are correct? First one, India is federation of states, not union of states. Second thing, the concurrence of states is not needed for the formation and unmaking of states and union territories. Third thing, in India, the residuary powers of legislation rests with the center. So now go with the first. I mean, if you know something about this, the first statement, your answer is already there. Like the first statement is wrong here. Why? Is India a federation of states? Is India something like USA where all the states came and then formed a nation? No, it is actually first India came into existence and then it declared there are some states. So that is why first thing is wrong. It is actually India is union of states. So if you remove first, then the answer is B. So that is 2 and 3. Yes. So for concurrence of states, that is permission of states is not at all needed in actually altering the state boundaries or altering the state names or even dividing that state into two states. So this is second thing. Now someone might ask about Telangana issue itself. Okay, like when Telangana formed, it is center that formed Telangana, right, from erstwhile AP. So there they asked the permission of Andhra Pradesh State Assembly first, but that doesn't mean Andhra Pradesh Assembly permission is needed to form Telangana state. Even if they approve or don't approve, center has the right to go ahead and form the state. So that is why second statement is correct. So this is somewhere comes under Article 3. So that is very important feature of federalism. That means center has more powers in Indian form of federalism. And third thing, you all know, like there are three lists: state list, center list, and concurrent list. So this concurrent list or the residuary powers that are not mentioned in these three lists: state list, center list, and concurrent list. If any item is not mentioned in these three, then it falls under residuary powers, and that residuary powers will be with the center. So that is why 2 and 3 are correct. So answer is B. So now we'll talk about Indian federalism and what are the unique features. So first thing, as I said, the US stands for Federation of States. And how US federalism is different? Because these states are completely independent and sovereign in their own territories. That means in US, states can have their own flag, states can have their own laws, and then they decided and formed the federal federation. So that is why it is complete or exact federal government. Whereas India is union of states. That is why some people also call it as quasi federalism. That means not complete federalism. And now in India, Parliament has the power to admit new states, create states, alter their boundaries, and unite or divide the states. So basically, in simple statement in political science, what they call is India is union of indestructible union of destructible states. Can you understand this? Indestructible union of destructible states. Whereas US is indestructible union of indestructible states. That means both cannot be destroyed. So that is a important difference. And finally, this residuary powers we already discussed. And now there is another important feature in Indian federalism, that is asymmetrical federalism. What do you mean by asymmetrical federalism? So this might also come as a prelims bit because this was constantly in the news. So when we say asymmetry, asymmetry means not same, being different. That means with respect to center and states, some states might have more power or more autonomy, and some states might not have the same autonomy or lesser autonomy they might have. What are the examples of this? For example, if you see, union territories have different kind of autonomy because center is more powerful in union territories. You all know that, like Dadar, Nagar Haveli, and all Delhi. There is another form of governor called lieutenant governor. So he has more powers. So that is why that form is different. Similarly, if we see fifth schedule and sixth schedule areas are there. There also certain special powers are given to governor. You also know that. And similarly, Rajya Sabha seats representation is not same for every state. It is different. So some states might have more and some might have less because it is not based on population. Like if UP actually is bigger state, it should have more seats. But actually UP and Mizoram will have same Rajya Sabha seats. So this is kind of giving asymmetry. So that is why this federalism is called asymmetrical federalism. But if you see US, it is symmetrical federalism. So I hope you have got the difference. Now, additional work that you have to do is there are certain new terms that came in the news. You have to at least know the definition and concept that are cooperative federalism, what is competitive federalism, what is quasi federalism, and what are the articles that deal with center state relations. You don't need to by heart those articles, but you need to know range. For example, like 245 to 255 articles actually deals with legislative powers division between center and state, and 255 to like 260 something like that deals with executive powers. And then you have financial powers like finance commission, GST. So where these articles come, so just roughly remember area, like whether it is under 260 to 265 or 255 to 260. If you at least remember the range, by seeing the options you can solve them. So that is how you can see this federalism aspect also. Now we'll go with the second one. Yes, this is economy part. And why this question came is because there was a context of currency war. There was a currency war between US and China. US accused, or US named China as a currency manipulator. So why this came, and why it mentioned currency manipulator? Because China started devaluing its currency, that is depreciating its currency with respect to dollar. So that is how we took inspiration and framed this question. So now see the question. Consider the following statements related to rupee depreciation and appreciation. Rupee depreciation encourages increase in exports and makes imports costlier. Second one, rupee appreciation instead results in decrease in exports and makes imports cheaper. Third one, dollar and other foreign currencies demand in market may result in rupee appreciation. Fourth one, Indian rupee demand in market may result in rupee depreciation. And these are the four options. Now, if you have quickly marked, then we'll discuss the answer. So first thing, here if you can see, what do we mean by rupee depreciation? So if you know something like rupee depreciation results actually an advantage for exports, because when your rupee value is less, the guys who are there in overseas, they can buy Indian products at much cheaper rate. So what they'll do, they buy more products. So what will happen for India? Exports will increase. So the first statement is correct. But if your rupee value is less, then what happens? If you are importing energy, crude oil or something, that becomes costly, because earlier it used to be something like $1 equal to 60 rupees. When we say depreciation, that means value of the rupee reduced. That means $1 equal to 60 rupees became $1 equal to 70 rupees. That means you are giving more rupees for buying the same quantity of oil because rupee depreciated. That means imports are becoming costlier, while the exports will increase because you can sell more at the lower rate. That is why more people will buy. So first statement is correct. Similarly, the opposite effect. Whenever rupee gets appreciated, it will be an opposite effect. So that is why first and two statements are completely correct. These are the impact. Now we'll see how it is caused. What is the reason? So now if you see third statement, that is dollar and other foreign currencies demand. That means when there is a demand for dollar, what will happen? Usually when there is demand for dollar, automatically rupee value will be depreciated because dollar is in demand, not rupee. So dollar value will increase. When dollar value increases, that means rupee value will decrease. So that is why third statement is wrong. And similarly, Indian rupee demand in market may result in rupee depreciation. It is actually opposite. If Indian rupee is in demand, that means Indian rupee is in less available quantity. That means its value will increase. So fourth statement is also wrong. So answer is A, 1 and 2. Okay, so now we'll see a little bit of same thing like whatever we have explained with the definition. Like rupee depreciation refers to the value of rupee being exchanged decreases against foreign currency. That is, earlier it used to be $1 equal to 60 rupees, now it is $1 equal to 70 rupees. That is depreciation. And when it happens, usually it happens when FDI outflows happen. So what are these FDI? FDI is foreign direct investment. So if somebody invested in India, let's say an American guy invested in India $10 billion, and now he saw market is not good and Indian economy GDP growth is not good. So he wants to withdraw that money. So when he withdraws that money, in what currency he will expect? He'll expect it in dollars. So what will happen? RBI has to give the dollars. So to give the dollars, RBI uh, will take the dollars out and from the market and give it to him. So when dollars are in demand, then it automatically results in rupee depreciation. And what will happen out of that impact? Imports will be costlier and exports will be profitable. And second thing, when rupee appreciation happens, rupee appreciation usually happens when economic growth is very good. Because when economic growth is good and economy is stable, many foreign investors will come and invest in India. That is when our foreign exchange reserves also will grow, if you remember. So that means more dollars are coming into India. That means when there are more dollars, the demand for the dollar will reduce. So rupee value will automatically get appreciated. That is, from $1 equal to 60 rupees will become $1 equal to 50 rupees. So that is what we have written in the second statement of that. So this is about currency depreciation and its impacts. So now we have to yeah, the same thing I have given with the slides also, like how it becomes expensive and cheaper for different industries and who gets benefits. Like when rupee depreciates, it is usually IT exports because our IT industry is very strong and we export many of them. So IT industries, textiles, automobiles, hotels and tourism gets benefit. So this might be also a question, like they will give industry like tourism will have benefit out of rupee depreciation. So this also you have to understand. And similarly, industry with high imported inputs like drugs, pharma, germs and jewelry, they will get impacted when rupee gets appreciated. That is it. So now we'll go to the next concept. So this is about a chemical. Like I was just listening to Karthik sir class and he was mentioning about arsenic and mercury. And these kind of chemicals are very very important because from the last 2 years there was a question on chemicals. Like in 2019 I think they given some name of chemicals or pollutants that are present in water, and they have given sorbitol, they have given mercury, they have given arsenic and all, and you have to identify which of these are pollutants in water. So that is why you have to know all the pollutants in air, water and soil. So from that perspective, 2019 this formalin was in news. So I'll read the question. In context of fish banned by some states based on presence of formalin, which of the following statements are incorrect? So focus on this, incorrect. So A, it is mainly used to extend the shelf life of fish, but it is also used in manufacturing of glue paint pesticides. Second one, long-term exposure to formalin may cause cancer. Third thing, it is non-toxic blue colored solution formed by mixing formalin gas in water. Last one, FSSAI has banned its use in fish. So now first two options you all can from common sense judge that those two are correct, A and B, because if it is not in like causing any damage, it wouldn't be news. It causes some kind of damage, and cancer is that damage. So that is why long term exposure is correct, B is correct. And first thing is also correct, it is actually used to extend the shelf life. But the third thing is wrong here, the C statement, because it is toxic. If it is causing cancer, that means it is toxic. So non-toxic, there itself you can eliminate it. If either B should be correct or C should be correct. As B is already correct, C will be wrong. So that is why C is the correct answer for this question. Yes. So now we'll see in detail like what will happen, why C is wrong. It is not only about non-toxic or toxic. There are other features also that we'll see. Yes. So first thing, formalin is a form of hydrated formaldehyde. That means formaldehyde gas, they will mix it with the water and then they will apply this to the fishes. Actually, this formalin usually is used in preserving the dead bodies. Okay, in this mummies and all, like even in the postmortem, after the postmortem, they are applied to the bodies to preserve them for longer life. And now, what these people are doing is to make fish appear fresh, like as they have catched it very recently, they are applying it on the fish, and that too in excessive quantities. And that is why it is becoming a great danger for consumers who are taking it in a sustained basis or long term basis. So the first thing, like already FSSAI, that is Food Safety and Standards Authority of India. So now you also have to see this FSSAI. Is it a statutory body or not? Whether it is formed under any act or not? And what are the structure of governance? What center has a role? What states have? So like this, try to see FSSAI also. And there is another new drive that is launched by FSSAI about fried oils. Like they have a campaign called Ruko or something. So try to know that campaign. Okay. And second thing, this formalin is artificial thing, but in fishes there is also a natural kind of formalin that forms, but that is in very less quantity. So it is not only artificial, but in fish it also forms naturally. So that is what here, some formaldehyde occurs naturally in fish as well. And last thing, it is toxic and colorless solution, there is no color for it. That is why you will not be able to distinguish. If it is blue color, then obviously fish also will have a stain of it. So you can guess a common kind of sense from this, like because it is colorless, people are unable to identify whether it was mixed with this chemical or not. And this is formed when formaldehyde gas is mixed with the water. This is about. And in the short term, if you are exposed, you will get irritation in the stomach and then some kind of gastrointestinal issues, but in the long term you will get the cancer. So that is about this chemical. Now what is the further research you have to do? You have to know what is persistent organic pollutants. So try to know about this, because these are the pollutants that are persistent, and there is a convention for this also. So try to know that what is that convention, because it forms under environment. And second thing, as I said, what are the different major pollutants? Like in water, groundwater especially, there are some pollutants like arsenic is there, mercury is there. These are ground pollutants. And for mercury also there is a convention. What is the name of that convention? It is Minamata Convention. Minamata. So that also you need to know. Similarly, for nowadays in Telangana, there was recently a news like uranium was being contaminated because of a mining activity somewhere in Nalamala forest or something. So that also you need to know how uranium, what is a safe percentage of uranium, and what is a beyond that drinking water will be contaminated. Similarly, air pollutants. So you need to know what is PM 2.5 range, what is PM 10 range, what is the other pollutants, air pollutants like sulfur. What is the difference between whether carbon monoxide is air pollutant or carbon dioxide is also a pollutant? This difference, these are different pollutants. So try to see them in each category: air, food, water, and land. And finally, last year there was a question on a pesticide. There was a famous pesticide that was banned, but that was used in Kerala. So that is why it came in news. So they have asked on that also. So whenever there is a news, any pesticide, like any banned one especially, try to know about them and their danger limits. So these are the three important areas from prelims focus area. Now we'll see the fourth one. Consider the following statements and choose which rivers these statements refer to. Okay, first one. It was home to ancient Shatavahana and Ikshvaku Sun Dynasty king. It rises at Mahabaleshwar in district Satara, Maharashtra, and flows through Maharashtra, Andhra Pradesh, and Karnataka. Almaty, a major dam on the river, controls the flow of water into the neighboring state. So by this time, I guess you would have guessed the answer, because if people from southern states would have already known about this Almaty Dam, this controversy and all, so you would have guessed it. So the answer is Krishna River here. But why I am asking in this way? Because UPSC is nowadays not focusing on what are the tributaries, where it is rising, where it is going and all. It is asking about different futures of that river, like what is the historical cultural future. So that is why I have mentioned this king dynasty. So now on, whenever there is a news, whenever a river is in news, try to see that historical angle or any ancient kingdom is there on that river, because this Tungabhadra river is famous for our Vijayanagara kingdom. So try to link that way. So here also it is Krishna river. Okay. And what is the difference? Where Godavari rises? Krishna river rises in Mahabaleshwar. Godavari also rises in Maharashtra, but it is Nasik, in Nasik district, Trimbakeshwar, I guess. Yes. So try to see that also. Similarly, see other rivers. And this Krishna river and Godavari river from this year are very important, because Telangana and Andhra Pradesh were constantly news about the dams and disputes, like water sharing between Andhra and Telangana. So that is about this, and we'll see like different aspects here. Yeah, the same thing. Krishna, Godavari, Mahanadi, and Mahadayi are in news. So if you want to focus, try to focus on these four, because Mahadayi is dispute between Maharashtra and Goa. It flows from Maharashtra, then to Goa, and some part of watershed is present in Karnataka. And similarly, Mahanadi is between Orissa and Chhattisgarh. So that is also very important dispute. It is playing out. And also no interwater disputes. This is a new act that was passed. So try to see what are the qualifications, what is the tenure and all. That is important from there. And finally, you need to know river interlinkings, like national waterways. Which river forms under which national waterway? Like national waterway 4, I believe, goes through Andhra Pradesh, like this Godavari river. That is forms under national waterway 4. What is national waterway 1 and 2? Try to know them also. And then not only rivers, but national parks just neighboring those rivers are also important. So now if you see, Krishna river has a national park or wildlife sanctuary called Krishna National Park or Krishna Wildlife Sanctuary is there. So wildlife sanctuary, okay, so try to see that. So try to see whatever the wildlife sanctuaries are there, and the dams, important dams on those rivers, and important cities. For example, Krishna river, Vijayawada city. Okay, that way. For Godavari, then what is the city? Rajamandri or something like this. So go cities and important areas that bypass. So if you see here, Tungabhadra, Krishna, Bhima, all these are tributaries, Vedavati and all. So try to see that. Now this issue. In August, there was also an issue in Yemen. That is why this question. Which of the following only country that borders both Red Sea and Arabian Sea? Okay. Now visualize the map and imagine where is Red Sea, where is Arabian Sea, and what is the only country that borders both of them. Now Iran, Saudi Arabia, Oman, and Yemen. So usually Saudi Arabia is out of the picture. If you know something about Saudi Arabia, where is it? Because Iran, Oman and Yemen are southern neighbors of Saudi Arabia. So Saudi Arabia doesn't have any access to Arabian Sea. So remove Saudi Arabia. And what about Iran? Iran has access to Arabian Sea. That is for sure. Because you are linking Chabahar port, that is Mumbai to Chabahar, through Arabian Sea only. So Iran has access to Arabian Sea, but not to Red Sea. Where is Red Sea? Red Sea is somewhere the Suez Canal passes through. So Iran also is ruled out. A and B are gone. So C and D are confusing. So here Oman is on right side, Yemen is on left side. So Oman also doesn't have any access to Red Sea. So Yemen is the option. So this is how they'll ask. So answer is D. So now I will show you here the map, and different conflicts we'll see in the Middle East very quickly through the map. So if you see here, this is Red Sea. And the importance of Red Sea is that Suez Canal connects Europe to, or Mediterranean Sea to Red Sea. And through that Europe to Asia, that is Indian Ocean, or Atlantic Ocean to Indian Ocean. So you can link Suez Canal in these different ways, like Europe to Asia, Indian Ocean to Atlantic Ocean, Mediterranean Sea to Red Sea. This is Suez Canal here. If you can see my pointer, can you see my pointer? So that is Suez Canal. Don't try to by heart, okay? Try to learn in a logical way. Then only you'll remember the maps. So now this is that. So this is Red Sea, and this part, this upper part is called Sinai Peninsula. Sinai Peninsula is a border region between Israel and Egypt. Okay, and now if you come down, this is Medina and this is Mecca. So which has access to Red Sea? Mecca has. So sometimes this might be also a question. So Mecca has access to Red Sea. And this is Saudi Arabia. So Saudi Arabia has access to Red Sea and Persian Gulf, nothing else. And then you have Yemen. So Yemen capital is Sana'a. So this is where the main fight is going on right now between Houthi rebels and Saudi backed Yemen government. So try to see this. And this island is also very important. Socotra Island. This is just down the Yemen, and this belongs to Yemen because there is a huge biodiversity loss here because of the war and all. So that is why this entire area is important. Next thing, straits. This is Bab al Mandeb. So remember, Bab al Mandeb, this is Strait of Hormuz. So remember the difference. On the west side of Yemen, it is Bab al Mandeb. On right side of UAE, it is Strait of Hormuz. So Yemen and Djibouti are the neighboring countries of this strait. And here it is Iran and these countries, Persian Gulf countries. Now because Iran and these Gulf countries are in news, Persian Gulf was also important last year. So try to see what are the bordering countries of Persian Gulf. So you can come from north to south. It is Kuwait, and then Saudi Arabia, and then Qatar, and then Bahrain, and then you have UAE, and then you have Oman and Iran. So this is how it is. And Iraq is also having access to Persian Gulf. Many people think Iran doesn't have any coast, but Iraq also has a sea access, a small port. It is called Basra. So that is how it enters the Persian Gulf. It is not clear in the picture, but that is what. Now coming back to the next important issue in Middle East, that is Golan Heights, an issue between Syria and Israel. So this is Golan Heights. This Golan Heights is neighboring three countries. So try to know them: Lebanon, Syria, and Israel. So this is important because this Golan Heights gives a river. That river flows into Sea of Galilee, and this Sea of Galilee or that river is a major freshwater source for Israel. That is why it occupied this Golan Heights. So that is how it is important. Okay. Now next thing, Israel-Palestine peace process. So from that point also you need to know the map. So now Palestine is in two territories. That is this is West Bank, and the second one is Gaza. So these are the two territories. So according to peace process, Trump is proposing to link them with a tunnel and then annex major areas of West Bank into Israel. So that is how he wants to create a Palestine with the major dominance of Israel. And now there is a plan of Israel to annex like 33% of West Bank. Like right now, whatever in there in map, that also they want to extend. And next thing, what is the capital of Israel? Like many people might misinterpret and say Tel Aviv. Tel Aviv is not the capital, it is Jerusalem. So Jerusalem is a capital for both Israel and Palestine. So now Jerusalem is officially recognized by US as a capital of Israel. So that is about Israel. Try to see this also and see what about Dead Sea. Like what is the unique feature of Dead Sea, and what is the salt, why people float in Dead Sea, all these aspects. Okay. And now finally GCC, Gulf Cooperation Council. This is also very important. So Gulf Cooperation Council have these countries which are in green. So basically the entire this Arabian Peninsula except Yemen, all the countries fall under GCC. So try to remember in this way. So these countries have come together because they have common interest in arresting Iran's influence. That is why they have come into picture. So if you know this logic, then it will be easy to remember which are countries part of GCC. So GCC countries part are Kuwait, Saudi, Bahrain, Qatar, UAE and Oman. Only Yemen is not there. Just if you remember that even Yemen is not there, then it will be easy. So this I told, like this is Iraq, just beside Iran, and this has a small opening if you can see. So that is where the Basra port is there. And now Iran and Saudi conflict. So now if you can see, this red portion is Shia, and wherever there is red color, that means influence of Iran is there. So that is Iran, and this is Saudi. Saudi stands for majority Sunni, and this black color lines are mainly Islamic State. So earlier ISIS used to majorly rule over here and in Yemen. So this is about that map. And now finally, another important issue in Middle East or West Asia is Afghanistan, because Trump proposed Afghanistan peace process. So from that point, you need to know every neighbor of Afghanistan. So if you can see, starts with Pakistan and then India, and then if you come little bit east, Tajikistan, and then Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, and then finally Iran. Another point is it is landlocked, and these four cities also important: Herat on the west side, Kandahar, Kabul, Mazari Sharif, and then again Herat. These cities are mainly linked with a Garland highway. So this is about Afghanistan from the location point of view. So these are the important conflicts right now: Yemen conflict, Golan Heights, Israel Palestine issue, Iran Saudi conflict, Palestine peace process, and Afghan peace process. So one question at least we can expect from that conflicts. So now the sixth topic, that is developing country. So you all know that Trump said that India is no more developing country but a developed country. So some way it is happy for us to know like we are developed, but it is not true. Yeah, so India and China were declared as developed countries by US. So in that context, this question: consider the following statements with respect to developing country status for a country. First thing, WTO has clearly defined the criteria and so classified countries as developed and developing based on it. Second one, developing countries get preferential treatment based on special and differential treatment principle of WTO. Third thing, longer transition period is provided for implementing WTO agreements. So now here the answer is very clear. Like the first thing is bit confusing, it's tricky, but the first one is wrong, because WTO doesn't define or doesn't given any criteria by which you can say a country is developed or developing. So it is up to individual countries to declare themselves. So if you remove one, the answer is 2 and 3. So 2 and 3 are correct. By being a developing country, we will have some special advantages. So now if you see, that is a context, as I said. So as I said, there is no specific definition in WTO about developing and developed countries. Now what are the benefits we'll get? Remember these benefits, this is important, because it gives preferential treatment. Second thing, longer transition period. That means if you have any accord, like for example the agreement on agriculture or on patent laws, if there is any agreement, we will get 10 years or 15 years, while other developed countries will get 5 years time to implement that. So that way we'll get benefit. Similarly, non-reciprocity in trade concession. That means like GSP, generalized system of preferences, is a system that is given by US to India because India was a developing country. Now they have removed it because they said we are developed country. So that is an example. Similarly, market access. And TRIPS stands for trade related intellectual property system. So that you need to know, like under that they'll give certain protection. And similarly, we have advisory and support structure from WTO secretariat. Now what is the research or extra study you have to do? Now know about WTO, its structure, dispute settlement body, because dispute settlement body is also news, but it was in 2018, but still there might be a question on that also. So try to see that. And then where is the next ministerial round is going to be conducted, and where was the last ministerial round, and what are the important outcomes of that ministerial round. So try to see this area. And WHO and WHA assembly is very very important, and we are going to discuss that anyway, but if you get a chance, try to read about that also. So that is about WTO. Now coming back to seventh one, why this was in news? Because our defense minister made a statement that we are no more going to stick or other by no first use policy. So that is why nuclear doctrine of India was in news. So seventh question. So this is the last question we will discuss. It's already, there is only 5 minutes more. So this question we'll discuss and stop. And there will be 2 more topics that we'll cover in the next class, and will complete entire August current affairs. So seventh one, consider the following statements with respect to nuclear doctrine of India. So first one, posture of no first use policy. Second one, non-use of nuclear weapons against non-nuclear weapon states. Third thing, India can build and maintain credible minimum deterrence. And fourth one, nuclear command authority is under civilian authority. So which of the above statements are correct? So if you have already marked, I'll disclose the answer. Basically, I've kept every statement correct to just so that you will be able to remember them, because all of them are very very important, and these are the main features of Indian doctrine, nuclear doctrine. So answer is D. Now what are the important features? So if you see this new policy was made in 2003, and the first important thing is credible minimum deterrent. That means our nuclear arms will be, or warheads will be very less, but they'll be very credible. Second thing, no first use. We'll never use it first. If somebody uses on us, then we'll retaliate. Third thing, massive and unacceptable. So if someone uses, we'll not use in the same proportion, but it is up to us how much to use. And finally, it is not under military leadership. If we see other countries in like Pakistan or some other countries, like Pakistan also doesn't have, but some of the countries like North Korea has under military leadership or one authority, but here it is under civilian leadership. That means prime minister, and this organization is called nuclear command forces authority or something. So try to see that also, who commands this, who are the members of that nuclear command forces. So that is civilian authority. And finally, non-use, and then we have strict controls. That means we will separate and military nuclear authority. And even though we have nuclear weapons, we are the only country that propagate and fight for nuclear weapon free world. That means we say our interests are better served in non-nuclear world than nuclear world. That is about. So eighth question, why this was again in news? It is about Chief of Defense Staff. So this was in news because on August 15th, our Prime Minister made an announcement that is going to create a post of CDS, that is Chief of Defense Staff. So eighth question, consider the following statements with respect to recently announced Chief of Defense Staff. First statement is tenure of CDS is at 5 years. CDS will act as a principal military advisor to the Defense Minister on all matters relating to tri-services. Third thing, the CDS will serve as a temporary chairman of Chief of Staff's Committee, which comprises the 3 services chief. So if you have prior knowledge, you can straight away eliminate the third option, because first and 2 are a bit confusing, but the third one is clear. Like already the main problem why we are appointing CDS is because we have already a temporary chairman of Chief of Staff Committee. To make it permanent, we have brought CDS concept. So why we'll put again CDS as temporary? So CDS will serve as permanent chairman of Chief of Staff's Committee. So what is this Chief of Staff's Committee? That means in Chief of Staff's Committee, Indian Armed Forces, Indian Air Force, Indian Navy, all these 3 chiefs will be present, and they will look after those appointments and all the other staff related activities, and their permanent chairman will be CDS. Okay, so third option is wrong, and it is asking about statements that are incorrect. So third is wrong, and the first one is also wrong. Tenure of CDS is not fixed yet. It is not 5 years or something. It is not like elections. So remove the first one. So 1 and 3 are wrong, and second one is correct. That is, he will serve as a final military advisor. This is the problem. Earlier, either Air Force Chief, Military Chief, and Navy Chief, all 3 used to come and give advice on any issue. But Defense Minister wants one point of advice. So that is why we have appointed CDS. So the answer is A, 1 and 3. 2 is correct. So now we'll see different features. Like the first thing, the government modified rules so that existing Chief of Army, that is Bipin Rawat, was made as CDS. So that is why they modified and made the upper limit as 65. Actually, the limit will be 62 only. So they modified and they made Bipin Rawat as a CDS. And tenure of CDS here you can see not fixed. And finally, CDS will act as principal military advisor to Defense Minister. And he is an appointed as 4-star rank. 4-star rank is common for any army chief. And finally, he'll serve as permanent chairman, that we have seen. And then why this was brought? This was brought basically to command the integration, or to make the integration between the 3 forces possible. Because right now, everything is acting independently. So we want integration so that efficiency can be improved and resources can be well utilized. So that is why you can see tri-services organizations and commands related to cyber and space also will be under command of CDS. And finally, the last thing, CDS will not be eligible to hold any government post after demitting office. This is also important, and will not be allowed to take up any private employment also without prior approval of government up till 5 years after demitting the office. And now finally, what is the additional reading that you have to do? Read about theater commands, because after this CDS, they gave some 4 or 5 new commands in Indian Army, like cyberspace command, like space defense command, and then Peninsula command, and then Andaman Nicobar command. So try to see how many commands are there, what are the names of it. And then recent initiatives on integration, they have also made some integration efforts also, so try to see them. It is very little bit, it goes more under security topic of this prelims.